Hey, everybody, welcome back. We are here today. We're going to discuss boundaries and how they are meaningful in our daily lives and just in our lives overall. Some things that we don't ever consider is what we talk about a lot on this channel and between my brother and I, a lot of different topics. And, as many of y'all know, we're going through the Old Testament now. And today, we are going to discuss one of our other topics because that is what we do best here at our congregation and going into things that most people would never consider. One is boundaries and the boundary of everything. And what I mean by that is sometimes we don't consider how there are boundaries in our day to day life, such as sight is a perfect example. We don't have the whole perception of all the realities around us because we are limited in the boundaries of our sight. Just as simple as that. We can't see radio waves. We can't see my voice traveling to you. I can't see the energy around you. I can't see the magnetic fields in things. Uh, Even though they do affect my cellular structure in a large way, I still can't see them, and I can't fully perceive them except under extreme circumstances. That's just a little test of what we're talking about. But boundaries in how we live. You know, do you drink too much? Well, that's not a physical boundary.
I think if you drink too much, maybe that's the boundary of your liver not being able to produce the alcohol in your system efficiently enough. While we're talking about boundaries, maybe some people's liver is a little bit more efficient at that and can give you a little bit farther stretch on your boundaries.
That's true. There are boundaries with that, but there are boundaries inside your body on the cellular level, on every level. So if that liver is, if the cells want to go outside of their boundary, they can't get outside of their comfort zone, else they die. So I think on the physical, on the real matter of what we can see and touch and attempt to understand that there are certain real boundaries in life, and then there are artificial boundaries that we can control, and that we, in some cases, like county, state, country boundaries, we are they're artificial boundaries, but nonetheless they are still real, and we cannot control those. We have to live within these artificial rules that many foolish politicians have forced upon us. So inside of those boundaries, we'd like to look at what we can control.
I think with what we can control, there's another whole set of boundaries you missed. Perceived boundaries. Boundaries that we think are there that aren't necessarily there. Things that you're told that you can't do or that you're not supposed to do, but what are the actual reasons of that? For instance, the artificial boundaries between, say, Texas and Louisiana for existence. Generally, that is not a, a boundary until we had, last summer, a big crisis here where there was set up border guards keeping people from Texas out of Louisiana and keeping people from Louisiana out of Texas. That there was actual border there that went from a artificial border to a real enforced border. Now, why was that border set up? It doesn't matter what you think or feel or believe, but the police state set that up. There was cops at the border not allowing people to go in or out. And you're supposed to be in a country that is the United States, not Louisiana as its own country, territory, and state, and Texas its own. They were supposed to be under one government, even though they might have slightly different opinions on that. You've now changed and set up that actual boundary.
Which is a boundary that we cannot control. Those kind of things are outside of our control. And what are the things that we can control? We can control the boundary levels of our anxiety, for example. We can control the amount of energy we focus on the boundaries of our time. We only have so much time in each day. So within side of that boundary, how do we manage those hours to get the highest and best use of our time for the highest quality? How do we squeeze in our business objectives and goals? How do we fit in the love and time with the people we care about? How do we take care of our body physically with working out? How do we manage our time in eating? Do we order a pizza and just sit on the couch and stuff our face and watch nonsense propaganda and wasteful energies on whatever series that means absolutely nothing, just filling your mind with junk? So all of those things and those boundaries we have some control over. There's not much we can do with cops on a border other than hoping that enough people would rise up against such things. But that is what it is. So we look at relationships, for example, too. That kind of falls into also time management. We have relationship boundaries. We only have so much time. I don't know if our love can be limited. There might be a boundary on love. I know sometimes I feel like, God, I just don't know if I want to get close to this other person. You have so many people that you care about. You're like, God, that's just a lot of energy to love somebody else. Now I'm starting to get attached to this other, this other person of the congregation or another employee or whatever the case is. Like, now I gotta expand that love boundary. Those are all things that we have control over. And one of the things, and I think a lot of these different things are individual topics on their own.
I think you're right that it could be an individual topic on your own, because it seems like we're kind of bouncing between time management and boundaries. And if I could tie that in together of how I think we're trying to put that there. So you mentioned, are you going to sit on the couch and watch mindless television and order pizza? Or are you going to allocate your time to getting to know someone else? Or maybe it's someone that's already within your family. And I've struggled with a similar occasion in my young child's life, that sometimes my house is a little bit of a mess. And I'm like, all right, well, I could go vacuum and clean and pick up this mess. Or I could spend the time with the child. And to justify it in my mind, right or wrong, whether you believe with me or not, I want to look back on that time, because there's only so much of it, because you have the boundaries of when they are a toddler, when they're a baby, when they grow up and they don't want you anymore, because every teenager hates everybody. Right. So do you want to look back on that time and say, hey man, you see these pictures of my clean house? Or do you want to look back and say, well, I had loads of time with my baby. I spent a 2-hour bath this morning because I couldn't get out. Like, I was supposed to come here and do more with the church today, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to sit here and spend time in this bath, because although this boundary is something, I got a time boundary. I've only got so much time in a day, but I can squeeze in a little bit of time left with the congregation and more time at home and still get my work done over here. So it's this balancing act back and forth. And I think a lot about time and our time boundaries is life is a collection of memories. I don't think anyone can dispute that. Once you look back at your life, those are just memories that you're looking back on. That was your life. So do you want to have memories of you watching the latest Simpsons episode by yourself at home? Or do you want to have memories of you spending time with the people you know, love, and care about?
Or utilizing that time boundary in reading something that helps you understand the world, understand any topic that is of interest that can better your life. Do you want to allocate some time to that when you're alone? The time boundary is really a real one. And some things, such as our perception, like you mentioned a minute ago, our perception of things is really skewed because our bodies are not equipped to understand the full spectrum of reality around us. We live on this level, this plane of material, if our eyes were able to microscopically go into the desk, we'd see that it's mostly space, and it's not really hard. We could just fly all around it. Same thing, and same thing with the universe. I mean, it's all the same.
But see, that's one of those points that I think falls under a perceived boundary, because we have invented things, be it Galileo or even later on to the electronic microscope, that you can see those things. So no, those used to be physical boundaries. Now they've moved from a physical, real, tangible boundaries to a perceived boundary where you can go and see things like that.
Well, yes and no. You can do that by putting on your goggles to be able to look into certain cells or certain matter to see how it is vastly different than our living reality. But in our day-to-day life, we're not walking around with microscopes on, because we just be bumping into everything. And, we can't, I'm sitting in this chair, but really I should be falling straight through it and straight through the earth until there's no gravity. But we don't live in that reality, because there are our cells are repulsing. My body is sending off energies that are not allowing me to fall through that chair. This chair is also moving, that is allowing me not to fall through it. There's some repulsive natures going on there, and those things we just take for granted. We don't actually need to contemplate those things on a daily basis, but they're still there. They're still around us. We don't necessarily have to contemplate that there are little boundaries of cells that are just rushing through our body, that are viruses, that are cancers, that are all sorts of little bundles of boundaries going through us, clogging up arteries. And
well, your arteries are a boundary right there in themselves.
That's right.
They keep the blood where it's supposed to be, and if you have a rupture in that boundary, it can be pretty serious.
So I think so the whole idea of boundaries and the false boundaries, like there are private property boundaries. You in this country at least, you used your time to do something that allowed you to accumulate some type of currency to be able to purchase a particular property. Whether there's big debates on private property and those sorts of things, but that is a real boundary. You go up to a farmer's house or a rancher or something, and you think you're going to go steal something off there, you might be in a little bit of trouble in some parts of Texas or Louisiana or any part of the middle of the country.
You mean that's still around in 2021? Oh, how terrible. Can't believe the socialists haven't taken us over yet. Jeez. We can only hope, can't we?
Yeah, they're giving it a shot. But, some things in relationships there are real boundaries in relationships. There's some things that we're just not going to do. Like what would I do? What if you're having a bad day and I'm having a bad day and I'm a smart aleck and then you're a smart aleck, and then all of a sudden 10 minutes later we're cussing each other out, and then we think it's a good idea to slap each other. Those are boundaries that we're just not going to go to.
No.
We're not going to cross a certain boundary of disrespect or physical harm. We're just not going to do it. You would have to end up being a totally different person than I know to even, and I would have to think that my life was in some type of danger where I needed to defend myself to slap you. That's just, which is another good, important reason to know self-defense, because my brother's kind of a big dude, so it's good to know how to get that out of the way. This is good fun. So, but in the relationship aspect, there are certain things that whenever we are alive, we're alive, and we have people that we're talking to that we love. Some of them we adamantly disagree with their belief systems, and their belief systems start to bump up on my boundaries and my personal space and sometimes people, even non-family members, will get kind of aggressive with their viewpoints, trying to breach my personal space with their words and with their body language and even their physicality. Uh, I, we do have to respect the boundaries of relationships. I think it goes in even further in this discussion of how we really should force ourselves to respect most boundaries or every boundary we actually can control. Some boundaries we just have to recognize that we can't change them, but we still have to waste our time doing them, like the boundaries of crossing into another country. We have to utilize our one resource of time to go do bureaucratic nonsense to get some visa or make sure our passport's right, or whatever the permissions from all the big brothers around the world to to freely travel and to learn different places and cultures. Those we are forced to respect, but we don't want to respect them, but we have to because we don't have a choice. We do not have the.
I mean, if you want to do it legally and if you get in trouble in there illegally, it's probably a bad idea. Right. I mean, for instance, when we were in Qatar, you could theoretically walk through the desert and end up in Saudi Arabia because it's a desert. Who knows when you're in what country and who knows when you're in the other country. So you could avoid some of that bureaucratic nonsense, but
seems like a bad idea.
It could be a bad idea.
Could be a bad idea.
Just going over for a cup of sugar, we just got lost. Oh, I'm in Saudi now.
I don't know if there are boundaries with all these different rules by everyone and everywhere. But I think the most important that we can control is there are boundaries on our food intake. If we eat bad things, well, we're going to get fat. We're going to get out of shape. It's going to be more difficult for us the boundaries of a staircase. It's going to be harder for us to run up and down them. Simple things. Simple act of making love to your wife. If you're breaking the boundaries of food intake, well, you might not be a really good performer.
You might not.
You might not be able to have better control over your time management because now you've breached what is natural boundaries for your body. You are breaching it with food that is not good for you. So now you're experiencing fatigue. You're not at your optimal level of thought process during the day. So now you're just wasting time. You're wasting your body. You're destroying yourself. Those are all boundaries that we can control, which are all, again, separate topics that each one of those we could spend a lot of time talking, especially how to control the boundaries of anxiety. If you're anxiety, sometimes you feel like your chest is just, I don't have this problem anymore, but there were times when I was younger, I would just have a lot of anxiety. I'd be like, I got to go somewhere. I got to do something. What's next? Or, if when you're 18, 19 and you get your first good heartbreaking, all of a sudden, you got all this anxiety and you don't know what to do with it. And, to learn how to control, instead of allowing that boundary to expand and consume your mind and your body and your thoughts, to learn how to focus that in, whether it's through neuro-linguistic programming or meditation, all of those things we'll go about and talk about in later subjects and videos. But that is an important boundary. How to take care of yourself, which everything that all these different boundaries are all controlled within the one boundary of time management, of how to do that better. Because without it, if we're very poor at time management, you could have spent the rest of the day in the bathtub, playing rubber duckies with Robbie. And
I sure could have.
And, we couldn't be here having this discussion about things that most people don't think about, is the boundaries of everything that we do. Sometimes on occasion, I'll use curse words. There's probably a boundary for that. It probably offends somebody. Sometimes I think it's the best way to express a particular thought. And some people are absolutely offended. So there are boundaries with communication.
There are two things on that when you're talking about cuss words. I always go back to Gone with the Wind. It took them 3 months for them to decide on the last scene. For one word, frankly, I just don't give a damn. 3 months to decide that, because there's no other way to adequately express some emotions. I mean, some words are just more powerful than others. It's true. They come across better. And secondly, your point about you might offend someone. I'm of the personal opinion that absolutely everyone needs to be offended and try to offend at least 3 people a day. You should try to breach your boundaries. If you're not getting offended and you're not trying to offend someone, not in a bad way, but in a good-hearted way. That's how we have this big cancel culture where everything's gone south. Oh, I don't agree with you, so I cut you off. No, no, no. Disagree, maybe come to a conclusion where you can agree, and you stretch your own personal boundaries. Like things that I thought I would never do, that you talked me into jumping out of a plane because you stretched my personal boundaries and gave me such a hard time about it until I actually did it. So if you don't do that, and if you're easily offended now and you go out on a quest to get offended and offend people, then you won't be offended. This whole PC culture is just society screaming out that I have low self-esteem and I feel sorry for myself and I don't want you to pick on me. You know what? Steep hills build muscle. That's just a fact. Steep hills build muscle. If you have an easy coast of it your whole life, you can't expect anything else.
Nor do you have any character, which goes to the whole boundary of character. If you get into let me rephrase this thought, the boundaries of attention spans.
What would you say?
I forgot already. The boundaries of attention spans and been able to have a conversation with someone at any significant length of time to where they know you're not being offensive to hurt them. You're being offensive because you strongly disagree with whatever opinion they have stated, and you're going to show them and persuade them with logic and reason. This is why I believe this thing. And if they're offended because they cannot reciprocate, then that is where we discuss. That is a good place to offend someone whenever they get on the defensive because they cannot logically and reasonably defend whatever it is that they believe in. And that is a boundary. They close it off.
Like we were talking about earlier, it's people have boundaries, and when you threaten their belief system and they can't defend their own belief system, no matter what it is, they put themselves behind walls and borders and just scream out with the big profanity, F you, you can't convince me, even though everything you sounds really good. Well, I can't be wrong because I'm me. Because I think everyone perceives this life they're going through as they're the main character in the story. And you're probably not the main character in the story, but you can be wrong. You're fallible. Not everybody around you is stupid. It might be in a lot of cases the other way around. But of course, you're watching our channel, so you're probably not one of those people.
Well, this goes back to the whole discussion that we will be talking about different ways over time in different videos about the boundaries of anxiety, how to deal with that, how to deal with the relationship boundaries, and what is respectful and what is good to create healthy boundaries within a relationship. How do you deal with the artificial boundaries of state? How can you manage that so it doesn't affect your anxiety? Sometimes these boundaries kind of overlap. Sometimes they bump and press up against each other. How we need to recognize the boundaries of our consciousness, and how do we understand the different perceptions that we can and cannot see, and what does that mean as a human? There are a lot of discussions that are wrapped around the whole notion of boundaries. And it's just another topic, and it's something that we wanted to share with you because we feel like that's an offshoot of a whole bunch of different topics. Since we are all made up of all these little boundaries and all these little cell boundaries and boundaries everywhere. I can't walk through this table because it's a boundary. There are a lot of things that we can learn and grow together and become better people because of that.
You know, with that, I think that's probably a pretty good ending point for our session today. If you would like to know more, we do talk about these things all the time. Like, we barely hit on this and try to give you a broad scope. Here on this video is more of a funnel coming into the church. Come in, we'll have some of these discussions. We do it all the time. You're always more than welcome to come. If you do like our videos, like, subscribe. And do you have anything else, Mr. Schmidt?
I'm just glad to have this discussion, and I'm really happy that we're getting so many people and comments, and people are enjoying our topics, and how we have been offensive to many on the topic of the Old Testament currently, and have been positive in some people who didn't realize the scope of what's actually in the book, like ourselves, before we even started. And this video was the perfect funnel, as you said. And so thanks for joining us. Please like and subscribe, share it, come out and see us, and
have a good day.